Good morning from the Office for Education Policy. The K2 Math Screener Guidance just dropped, and so I thought I'd do a really quick video today to highlight some of the differences between math and literacy and just give you some inside scoop on the design and how this is intended to be used. The K2 Math Screener and Testlets are part of the larger Atlas system for K2 in math. And again, it's this larger system that we have to think about and situate the use of the screener scores and the use of the testlets in the idea of this larger system. So in the case of math, the screener is slightly different from the literacy screener, and we're going to get more into that detail. This video is not to take the place of the information that you're getting through your guidance. It's to enhance it, maybe to take it a little bit deeper, and to provide some nuance and insights that are based on my knowledge of the design and intended uses and my background in measurement. So the experts have put out their guidance, and the purpose of the screener is to assess basic foundational skills in math, guide instructional decisions, and provide support for students who don't meet grade level foundational skills. The screener is slightly different for math than it is for literacy. It's to help determine whether students demonstrate readiness or could be at risk in their basic foundational math skills. And this focuses really on a subset of the standards for each of these grade levels, looking particularly at counting, place value, comparison, addition and subtraction across the strands of number and place value and the strand of computation and algebraic reasoning. So there's a very particular focus. The screener doesn't cover all the standards. The focus here on the screener is foundational skills that might get in the way of a learner being able to access grade level instruction. Again, the screener has a different purpose from the interim and the summative, and so the guidance should reflect these differences. Because these are designed differently from literacy, it's important to know those differences and to look at the guidance for math, even if you've already looked at the guidance for literacy. This is just a slide that captures the resources I was able to find so far. These came out in a commissioner's memo, and I've linked it here, and I'll also put it in the description of this video. So you will have slides that give information about timing, when to give testlets, how to give testlets, and how to use the screener information. And you'll also have more detailed guidance about testlet progressions, and that's pretty important because those were designed with a particular learning progression in mind. I think it's always important to think about the intended uses, and this is, again, this assessment was designed for a purpose within the larger system of assessments. So the math screener results are intended to assess basic foundational skills at grade level, but do this at entry to grade level. And this year, I know your results are coming back a little bit later, and so you may have already done some of the follow-up work based on what you know because your students have been in class with you for 2.5 months. So this is not to take the place of what you already know this year. But beginning next year, you'll have results that'll come back immediately and you'll be able to act on these. So the Atlas system is built to be an overall system. And I'm particularly excited about the screener and testlets because they follow an intended progression of learning. And to me, this system can really support you as you are gathering information about your students' needs. So these screeners signal the potential need for diagnostic testlets. And in math, it's slightly different because the items are at grade level. So the math screener is intended and does identify students that are behind based on entry expectations for grade level instruction. These do help differentiate between students that need interventions or may need additional support. Again, I think we need to be careful that we don't just shove kids into a tier of intervention, but that we think carefully about their level of need, whether it's a more personalized set of supports and scaffolding or additional time and intervention that might be needed. What we don't want to do is move kids into below grade level instruction and not give them access to grade level tier 1 instruction. That's super important. So it does provide information about students to guide instruction, particularly as you use the testlets. It does not serve the same purpose as the interim or the summative, and it does not act as a substitute for more formal evaluation to figure out if a student is eligible for special services. This is a loaded slide. It contains so much more than what you see on the screen. The screener is a signal. It's not a determination. It's a signal. And it helps you to understand if a student might be entering your classroom potentially at risk of not being ready for grade level instruction. The testlets are designed to help home in on the specific targeted needs of the student. What I think is really critical and important is to understand the design of the testlets, that these testlets are designed to reflect a learning progression in mathematics. And they do so in a way that highlights these foundational strands in our standards. So the beginning of the year expectations are really around the foundational aspects of number and place value and computation and algebraic reasoning at each of these grade levels. You can see the progression here of what students are expected to learn. And then you will also have parts of the system, such as the interim and the summative, that will help you assess their level of mastery of these standards as they go. But what's critical here is we're trying to uncover where students might need additional support for these foundational pieces. Because if they don't get these foundational pieces, they may not be ready and they may not be able to access the increasingly complex understandings that we need them to have to be able to do mathematics as they move through their schooling. What I really love about this system is that it is a system. And I will say that I know it sounds like everything is very prescriptive. You must do X, Y, and Z. But these testlets are not required. They're an offering. They're a tool. The goal here is to help you move student learning in the standards. It's not to make you use a tool. The assessment is a tool. The goal is not to assess. The goal is to learn. So the assessment helps you understand what you need to do to guide your learning experiences that you plan instructionally for your students. So we don't want to mechanically go through the motions of just giving testlets. We want you to use your professional judgment. If you've already identified where your kids are and what their needs are for support and intervention, who needs advancement, then the testlets may not be for you this year. Maybe next year you start really getting into using the full system. The beauty of this system is that it's an offering. The screener and testlets in mathematics are not required by law, but they're an offering because they follow a learning progression. You have this system that's aligned from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You have not only alignment across the year, but you have alignment between grade levels because it's aligned to our standards. You have a system that has been designed to be coherent within year and across years. So you're going to have better information over time for your students. So rather than think about this as an exercise in, I have to do this because it's required of me, think about it as, if I don't already have this information this year, how might these testlets help me uncover student learning needs and plan instruction for them? And then as we get into the interim and the summatives, which are just about to happen, if not happening now, think about how the system and the intended use of these different assessments can be tools in your toolbox to support your professional judgment and what your kids need next. Not replace your professional judgment, not give you something else to do. The key here is ultimately this full system should save you time, not use your time on assessment. Assessment should serve learning. That's the purpose of it. That's what it was created for in terms of this information, particularly these screeners and testlets. Now, the interim has a different purpose. It's to help you understand if students are making progress on what you know you've already taught, and whether or not you have some students who've already mastered some of the things that are coming in your curriculum and you know you're going to need to extend or accelerate them. And then the summative is like a systems check. So let's not forget purpose. Let's not forget professional judgment. Let's not do things mechanically. Let's think about the offering you have here of a system. If at this point in the year, because of the standard setting, the results were released late, it's not useful to you, move on. If it is still useful to you, use it as it was intended to be used. I want to point out that another part of this very coherent system is that there are blueprints. And these blueprints provide you additional information. It's also important to know that the blueprints, they provide your K2 math progressions that are assessed and the intention of those assessments, right? But there's a difference. Literacy and math have design differences that are important to understand. The literacy screener is required by LEARNS. How the student is determined to be at risk is different in literacy. It's based on how the students do on each of the different components of that screener, not the overall score. The literacy screener includes items and expectations at entry or from prior grade level. The math screener includes items at grade level with the standards set based on entry-level expectations. What do we expect a kindergartner to be able to do? Can they count to 10? Not can they count to 50? And this is critical because you can see already that there's a difference, and understanding the differences and what the expectations are help you to interpret the results, I think, a little bit more fully and within the intention, both what it's intended to support in your understanding of the students' mathematics skills and the limitations of the information. So keep that in mind. The math screener is items that are at grade level, but when teachers did standard setting, the question they were answering was, at what point do we think this is critical for a student at the entry? And at what point after this is something that I don't expect a student to have at entry, but I expect the student to learn in their timing with me? A few other critical differences are that math is reported as a single score. It's not reporting categories. Literacy had reporting categories. In math, it's all of the items together in the screener reported as a single score. So that overall scale score has a higher reliability. So that determination at the cut, whether a student is above and below the cut, can be determined within the range that you're given in your scores. So if you look at the scores, you can see that on average at this particular school or district, you have this range of +1, +1. When you get down to this school level, you can see it's a plus or minus 3. Excuse me, those are plus or minus before. And so you're able to interpret the scale score within the context of the measurement error, right? That margin of error. And you're able to see a cut on an overall scale score. So in the math screener, that single scale score does matter, and it gives you important information. I want to illustrate that briefly here by looking at a couple of ISRs. The math scores do have that clear scale score cut, and that's indicated in the ISRs, the individual student reports, and that's based on standard setting by grade level. So teachers sat down, reviewed an ordered item booklet from the lowest difficulty item to the highest difficulty item, and they said, at this item, this is an item that represents kind of what we would expect a student entering this grade level to already have, either from home or pre-K environment in the case of kindergarten, or prior, they should come in knowing these things from their prior years of instruction. So you do have more information that is able to be tied back to the scaled score. You also get information about what that risk means. And then you get some parent resources that can be shared with parents, which I think is really an incredible advantage for all of us to have this information so tightly tied together. Again, that is part of this coherent system. So now all the pieces of the system are speaking to the same thing. How is this student doing on what the student is expected to know and be able to do based on our Arkansas academic standards? And to me, that's something we haven't had. We've had various assessments that give us different information and not necessarily aligned, particularly at the K2 level. They were partially aligned to our standards and our expectations, but they were based on the building of the system for other purposes. This system has been built to support you and your students and to support all of the things that help ensure a learning system that moves Arkansas students forward so that we can really see change in our students as they learn more and demonstrate more through this continuum from kindergarten to high school. The first administration of the screener, of course, the results were delayed because of standard setting, and that makes this information probably a little moot at this point in time because you have probably used your curriculum-based measures or other measures to really know where your kids are, and you're moving forward with instruction. I cannot stress that enough. In the future, you're going to get this information back in real time. You're going to be able to act on it, go into testlets. You're going to have an aligned system that is just going to be an amazing support for you. The detailed guidance that's provided by DESE is really important. It gives you more information about the design of the testlets that are available to you in math. How to interpret potential risk and determine the next steps with testlets, that's in that detailed guidance. How to assign those testlets, how to work them into the schedule. There's just some really good information. It's intended to be flexible. It's not intended to take the place of core instruction. And also, we recognize that there are practical questions. Now, I don't think a webinar from DESE has been recorded yet, and so what they've done is they've put out this survey for questions. So please, if you have practical questions about the screener and how to use the score, or about the testlets, how to assign them, how to use the system, please reach out. Use the QR code I've included here or that bit.ly and ask those questions. That's important because then that will lead to an FAQ that will help others. That FAQ I just mentioned, it will also help you. It's not just about helping others. It's about getting practical answers to your very practical questions. And if you do have practical questions, I encourage you to go to the experts, but you can also leave comments in the video or in the comments section of the video. Let us know if there's more that you want to hear, if there are other topics you want us to address, and then stay tuned because I look forward to getting to address those. Thank you so much for attending to this video, and I just thank you for your interest in education and in our students here in Arkansas.